Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to our webinar about Secure by Design, how implementing good quality methodology delivers better software quality. In this webinar, we'll learn how high code quality and how tackling quality as early as in the design stage ultimately drives the most accurate and secure software at the lowest cost. This webinar will focus on a true shift left approach and the resulting challenges of handling quality later in the development lifecycle. By starting from the left, your time and energy are optimized in the area where code quality serves as a stimulus for secure code. I'm Robert Curley, Product Marketing Manager for SonarQube, and your moderator for today. Jonathan Slaughter is the presenter on today's topic. Sorry, Jonathan, I fumbled over that one. Jonathan is a security governance officer at Sonar and has worked in the quality management and security space for over 20 years. His experience in highly regulated spaces, such as life sciences, healthcare, automotive, energy, and US federal, brings a unique perspective of how quality and security can intersect to deliver optimal application health and the best value for the organizations that deliver them. Jonathan and I have had some great conversations on this topic, and trust me, you are in good hands. Before we start, I want to go over a few essential housekeeping items. This session is going to be 45 minutes and includes Q&A session at the end. We will have time at the end to answer your important questions. During the webinar, you are invited to submit your questions via the Q&A box in Zoom. Please do not use the chat box. Throughout this session, we will use the Q&A area to respond to your questions. We'll post all the questions asked during the session, including your answers, in our community forum. Don't worry, responding to you is very important to us. You can be sure your questions will be answered, even if we don't get to them during the session today. Additionally, we have two fantastic panelists behind the scenes who will answer your questions live during this webinar. From our analysis team, Nicolas Gauthier and Lucas Greevy, solution engineer at Sonar. This session will be recorded. Emphasis on will. We are recording it. And we'll send you a link to it via email within the next few days. Lastly, at the end of the webinar, a quick survey will appear on your screen. We appreciate your feedback. We really want it. So thank you in advance for your participation. All right, enough of me rambling on. Let's dive into the session we're all here for, right? Over to you, Jonathan.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Robert. I really appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. As you said, my name is Jonathan Slaughter. I'm a security governance officer here at Sonar. And I would ask for everybody else to introduce themselves, but we don't have time for that. So I'll just go ahead and continue on. So today, the agenda for we're going to be talking about is kind of posted right here. I'm not going to read it off to you because I know that everybody here can read, but I will say a little bit about myself, in a little bit more detail. I've had the opportunity over the past 20 to 25 years to work in both quality and security, and in many roles I've actually managed and been responsible for both. So what this is an opportunity for me to express some of my experiences and the ways that I have found value in partnering quality and security together in a myriad of different organizations. Obviously, as Robert has said, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. At the end, we will make time to be able to answer some questions live. And as always, your feedback is going to be warmly appreciated. So let's start us off with a poll real quick. And this poll is really just to give me a chance to select all that apply, but I would like to know which of the following quality methodology or frameworks do your organizations currently use? And if I could ask anybody to just please, as you're signing in there, let us know. This helps me understand kind of my audience to a degree. While this is a quality focused and quality management focused presentation, you should hear some familiar terms, but I also want to make sure that I honor the audience. I'm genuinely appreciating the individuals who are answering no clue. Honesty is an excellent policy. So, all right. So whenever we're ready, I think we're getting pretty close. I'll give it another 15 or 20 seconds on the poll, and then we'll close it out. Oh, sorry. That's me. Okay, good. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing that. Okay, and we're gonna and let's share results. Okay, and I will move on from here. Thank you. I see we got a pretty good setup of ISO, decent on continuous improvement, and a lot of no clue. Beautiful. All right, so let's go ahead and move on through here. So the one thing that I want everybody to take away from here, and the reason I put this slide up front is this is the last page of the book. The one thing that I have put in here is this, that good quality is security. And I think that's an important thing to focus on, and that's really what this entire presentation is going to be around. Doing it right the first time is one of the best security practices that you can implement, um, if not the single best. And so we're going to talk about that as we go through. A little bit of inspiration. So you're going to see some inspirational quotes, at least inspiration to me from individuals like Shewart, who is the grandfather, they would say, of statistical quality. And then obviously Deming and some other individuals who are his followers. So data have no meaning apart from their context. And so that's an important thing, and we'll begin to discuss what that means here. So what is good quality? So good quality is actually an outcome, and we'll talk about this in a moment. But quality itself is just a measurement. So when you think about the term quality, it's the standard of something as measured against other things of a similar kind, the degree of excellence of something. And then let's take a look at good quality is an outcome. And this is a legal definition. So this is probably the best definition I've seen, and it really comes from your medical devices, pharmaceutical, life sciences background. The product is effective, efficient, and appropriate for present and anticipated and future circumstances. So really, it operates as intended and it's fit for purpose. Uh, we think about the difference between these two terms. We talk about quality. The example I often use is when I go to play golf with my friends. I might beat my friend by a couple of strokes. And so I've won. So at the end of the day, I'm more excellent than they are. But if we both shot, you know, 48 over par, and I shot 46 over par, neither one of us is very good. Let's be quite honest. And so the idea of good quality is more of an outcome, is what is it you're trying to achieve? And the purpose of quality is to achieve those type of outcomes. Equally, the purpose of security is to achieve outcomes that are secure in their delivery. And we'll start talking more about that as we go through here. So we think about a term like 99.9% is good enough or good enough quality. We're right there. I mean, at the end of the day, that's an A plus. We're all getting our 4.0 on something like that. But if we were to take 99.9% as good, then here's some things that we'd be running into. 4,400 newborns, or 12 per day, would be delivered to the wrong parents when leaving the hospital. 880,000 credit cards in circulation currently would have the wrong cardholder information on their strips. 291 pacemaker operations would be incorrectly performed each year. Well, that number is high. It's also much lower than the 107 per day of general incorrect medical procedures that would be performed. So when we start talking about data, saying we're 99.9%, it really can be a great number, but it really is in of itself, it's just a measurement. It's not necessarily an outcome. The question is it a good outcome? Is 99.9% a good outcome in these particular situations? And the answer, I think we could all agree, is no. So the idea around good quality versus traditional quality really comes from the concept of kind of a cost benefit analysis. And so most people, when you see it on the left, you'll see that kind of traditional quality model in which the decision is made and says, right, here is an optimal level of quality. Because in order to implement anything further, it's actually going to cost us more money, and we're not going to get the same return on investment. Whereas if you start taking the idea of a true total quality or a good quality model and you start looking at it from an outcome standpoint, over time, you'll generally see that as you move closer to that 100%, you're actually lowering your overall cost, you're improving your overall quality, and you're delivering lower non-conformance, which is a super essential task. And we'll start talking about how that works as we kind of go through here. So, which leads to the next slide. How do we achieve good quality? And before we do that, I want to take a break because we're going to get into some more details here and do our second poll. So the second poll here really is asking the question, uh, which of these two characters that are Harrison Ford, iconic Harrison Ford characters, do you most identify with? Are you a Han Solo or are you an Indiana Jones? And we'll go ahead and take some time to go ahead and look at those results. Everybody feels very comfortable. These answers are coming in pretty fast. This is interesting to watch this. Everybody feels very comfortable in their answer.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
Yeah. And I do promise there's a method to this particular madness. Oh, looks like it's getting interesting. All right, give it a few more seconds. All right. And when we're ready, I think we can go ahead and end the poll and then go ahead and share the results and see what we got there. All right. So as you can see, we got about a 60-40 split. People kind of tend to lean Indiana Jones. Um, uh, Han makes a good performance, but tried to catch up a little bit, but didn't quite make it. All right. So good job on there. So what we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and ask, kind of give the answer as to why. The reason that I asked this question is from a thought process, is these are two iconic characters that have a completely different understanding of how they approach risk. And so I want to think about when we look at the way that complex systems theories and things along those lines, we can get into all sorts of like sociological science and everything. Han Solo, I often think of Han Solo as a developer and an engineer. Um, the type of individual who says, if you think about C-3PO, he's like, sir, the odds of going through this, asteroid shower at hyperspeed are, 3,800 to 1. And he's like, don't ever tell me the odds. Whereas Indiana Jones is much different. He's much more risk oriented, a little bit more risk averse. I mean, you think about engineers, and an engineer mindset might say, you know what, I want to go in, I want to rip off the mask of the universe and stare God in the face. Whereas Indiana Jones is sort of that risk person is like, have you seen the end of Raiders? It doesn't really end well when you do that. And so there is that sort of idea and mindset about how we tend to look at risk, how we tend to look at unpredictability, what could potentially happen. And so we start thinking about unpredictability or entropy or things along those lines. We'll start talking about that a bit more, but that really kind of comes into quality, security, and it really does approach how we look at the world. So, and with that, we will move on. Thank you all for taking the time to participate in that little poll. Um, all right, so more inspiration. Higher quality is less expensive to produce than lower quality, from our friend Edward Deming. So this is something that we're going to focus on now. We're going to start talking about the concepts of cost and the cost of quality. So this is a COQ is a methodology that a lot of organizations will use to understand the extent of its resources, which we'll call cost. That's time, that's personnel, that's technology, things along those lines that are used to either prevent poor quality, that will appraise the quality of the products or services, or result from internal and external failures. And so failures are where we've had a situation where something internally has escaped and or externally has escaped out into the wild. And so from a security standpoint or a quality standpoint, we'll talk about some specific examples there in a minute. This data really does allow organizations to determine the potential savings gained by implementing specific improvements. So what's the cost to implement something in prevention versus what's the cost of implementing something in the appraisal stage. And so we'll start talking about that. So these costs, they fall into three categories. You can see I highlighted them, so they're kind of obvious. Preventive, appraisal, and failure. And so we'll break down. So we call this PAF modeling. And so something to start thinking about as we start talking about quality concepts. So when I think about prevention, this is where it could go wrong. So when you think about prevention and preventive controls, you're asking the question, what could go wrong? You've identified it and you start to address it there. A great concept is it's called inverting. For those of you who are into 19th century German mathematicians, Carl Gustav Jakob Jacobi is the father of elliptical functions. Talked about inverting and basically flipping it on its head and helping you solve a problem. So don't ask how it can be successful, ask what will cause it to fail. So when we ask that question, what would cause it to fail? Those types of things are, for example, we would do that in the planning phase, in the product design phase, process design, data collection analysis, and of course, training, teaching people to do it right the first time. Appraisal. This is kind of when we're checking and we're saying it will go wrong, as in if this makes it out, it will go wrong. And so we start thinking about a lot of things like inspection, testing, the equipment used to test and or the software for implementation. Internal failures. So it's going wrong. It is going wrong right now. And so that could be things like, hey, we've gone through it. This has come out. And we start looking at it and go, this can't work. So a lot of quality individuals, if you work in this, you'll talk about things like scrap. I can't use it anymore. Rework. I got to go back and do it again. Retesting. I've got to revalidate it. So reworking is I've got to go back and do it right the first time or second time. Retesting is I got to check it to make sure. Yield losses. This is a great example of I expect to get this much output, but because of my problems, I'm only getting this much output. And therefore, that lower output and occupancy and efficiency is actually leading to missed deadlines, missed timelines, missed deliverables. Downtime, obviously, nobody likes that, especially in the software world. We don't like to have our systems go down. And then obviously technical debt, which is a really more software, more technology focused idea. But if you're constantly building poor product that's getting stacked back over here, you're eventually running out of time to actually go do anything with it. And it just builds up over time, and it becomes untenable. And then obviously, when you get to external failures, this is where it's wronged other people. And so it's gone out, whether it's a customer, that's other individuals, that's a patient. This deals with things like returns and replacements, warranty, liability, complaint investigations and adjustments. Another great one from a security world, data breaches. So let's take a look at some of this. And so as we kind of talk into this going, okay, these are costs. And we use the word costs because this is where you put your money, you put your investment. So what's the value? How much does it cost? And which one is the best place to put our funds? So talk about an ounce of prevention is usually worth a pound of cure. This is actually really aligns well with this. So what we use is what's called a factor of 10. And so a factor of 10 is a methodology for scoring how much it's going to cost to actually implement a necessary control to provide the same protection as something earlier in stage. So that's the way to think about it. So for every dollar you spend in prevention, it's going to cost you $10 in appraisal. So if you think about for every time if I train somebody right the first time, then I can actually have more trust in my quality review process. So maybe I can do a little bit less sampling and I can have a higher trust deal. I can do some of that lower. I don't have to make much investment in testing and inspection resources. But if I have failures, I can then focus those. But in order to, if I have a problem and I have something that inspection catches, I have to go back and I have to not only make sure that a protocol is built for that, I also have to go back in and start doing retesting. So all of a sudden, just saying I'm going to put this in inspection and check for it, I've got to go back and I've got to spend money now because inside of my inspection, going back and doing retraining. So it actually costs me more at that point. Internal failure, I'm not going to do a 10 times 10 is 100. I'm not going to do $100 signs here, but give you the idea that it's factor of 10. So for every dollar, it's $10 in inspection. It's $100 worth of it's going wrong in internal failure. And so you start thinking about that. Why would that be so expensive? Because not only do you have to do prevention, and I have to do that rework, but I also have to do and invent potential retesting, do different testing, add testing protocol, potentially add testing resources. Do I need to invest in further software or technology or equipment in order to be able to catch these things that could have been caught or should have been caught but weren't? So there's a failure in that process, and I have to go back and figure that out. And then finally, you get into our favorite category, which is the external failure, which is 10 cubed. which is 1,000. So it's 1,000 times more expensive on average. And this is where you start getting into the cost of an external failure. So when we start talking about costs, let's look at average security breach, data breach. I think last year was about 4.5 million, $5 million for a company. If you look at healthcare, I think it was a little bit higher, like 7.8 million, somewhere around there. Whereas if you start looking at things like downtime or failures in systems that led to outages, I think you started looking at, I think, for example, in certain things like you 80 million a year on average when it comes to like energy sector when you're dealing with the software on an oil rig, um, up to product recalls for software as a medical device. I think it's up to 5 million a day in some case. I think there was one that's up to $600 million. So you can see these are significant amounts of money. And what's happening is because you've got those outcomes that are unpredictable and they lead to failures. So we call these first group the cost of quality. So this is the cost of doing it right. Whereas these are the costs that you have to spend because you chose to do it to not invest early on. So you need to put your money in the places that are going to deliver the most value. And so we call it the cost of poor quality, or COPQ. All right, some more inspiration. It is not enough to do your best. You must know what to do and then do your best. Another Deming quote. And so as we kind of move into this section, what I want us to focus on, we've kind of talked about cost. We sort of talked about good quality as a concept. And now we're going to talk about how we kind of dig in and go through that process a bit more. So books on a shelf. So some people here may be familiar with the books on the shelf analogy. I happen to love it. I think it's a very good example. So the question is, how many different ways can you order X number of books on a single shelf? So stacking them next to each other in any specific order. So you start thinking about that. If I have two books, I get two possible outcomes: book one, book two, or book two and book one. Um, Three books, I can go 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. You can do all those different ways. So, all right. Well, all of a sudden, I go to 6 books and I have 720 possible outcomes. All of a sudden, that exponentially grew out of control. So I start thinking about the different sort of things that go into place here. And now I have 10 books, 3.6 million possible outcomes. And so if you start thinking about the books, you got to go, how does that happen? And this is factorials. And so what this is it's dealing with different types of permutations. And so you start thinking about permutations in math. It's anytime you see like a number with a exclamation point next to it, it's called a factorial. And what you do is you take that number times n minus 1, n minus 1 again, all the way down to 1. So 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 is 720. And so what you find is you could have 10 books on a shelf and you could spend 3.6 million different ways of stacking those books in a way that if anybody asks. So if I said just take 10 books and my only rule was put them on a shelf, then stack them horizontally or whatever, as opposed to vertically, as Egon would say is a problem, what we would look at, we would go, that is 3.6 million. That's a lot of uncertainty into what you can do. And the odds of predicting which one somebody's going to do is just pointless. And that's only with 10. So it kind of leads us to our conversation here. So unpredictable outcomes are not only poor quality. I can't have no idea what's going to be the outcome of what I'm doing. They also increase the likelihood that the product's going to fail, because if I have one way that it works and I haven't established the right combinations to make that work, I'm going to get a lot of unpredictable outcomes. So it's increasing the likelihood that I get the wrong outcome. It's going to lead to an impact on end users through longer resolutions. I don't know why it did what it did. I don't know what particular combination or what particular code improvement I should do. What is the particular control or outcome that I'm trying to focus on? I don't have the right guardrail in place here. I didn't pass a quality gate, things along those lines. So I have to go back and investigate that. Again, I've had an external failure. I now have to go back and go do some rework, but I've also got to retest and I've got to understand why it made it outside of our environment. And then obviously risk to the assets and the products, the support and processes. So assets, this could be your software code. This could be patient data. This could just be personal health data. This could be the operation. And we're not talking just about risk to the assets when it comes to their confidentiality or their integrity. We're also talking about the availability. In the case of it just doesn't work. And if it doesn't work in certain aspects, forget about security. You're impacting people's lives in a way that could be potentially fatal. So what you want to do is you want to build from the desired outcome. And you heard me talk about good quality as an outcome. And so good quality is when the product itself is effective, efficient, and appropriate for present and anticipated future circumstances. So what effective really means, if you look at the definition, is deliver the intended or desired results every time. Does it do what you intended it to do? It actually works as I intended it. Efficient. The products deliver the intended or desired results in a way that doesn't waste resources. So again, if every time when we talk about security, this is one of those where quality and security tend to uh, feel like they want to collide because the idea of it needs to be effective, it's got to work every time the right way, and it's got to be secure. Can't waste resources, but it's also got to be efficient. If it takes me too long to log in, if I have to go through too many pages in order to be able to get access to the information, you'll have product people, you'll have other types of individuals pushing and saying it needs to be quicker. I need to be able to have further uptake. I'm not getting the type of uplift that I need on this particular software application. And it's because we have too many pages that we got to check in, or we've got too many different things. It's about making it more efficient. It needs to be efficient. And then appropriate products deliver the intended or desired results regardless of changing circumstances. Those circumstances can be new regulations. They can be a change in the market. They can be the fact that you've had a merger and acquisition. And so why you had that acquisition. Are you buying in new IP? Are you buying market share? What are you doing? Are you going into a particular new industry vertical? So a lot of tools themselves, a lot of people on here probably in an industry agnostic tool. So if they're working in software, maybe I design something specific for healthcare. So I have very specific regulations that change constantly. But maybe I'm a software technology, for example, that doesn't really have an industry but can be used by lots, well, I still have to be in play in a lot of different moving parts that go into it. So let's take a little example. Let's go back to our books on a shelf and let's start looking at the idea. So books on a shelf 2, The Search for Less Entropy. And if anybody can guess what Mel Brooks film this is making reference to, kudos to you. You can go ahead and throw that in the chat. And then at the end of the day, I'll see if anybody gets it. So how do we know the lower number of possible outcomes by 99% without lowering the number of books? So what we want to do is we want to take that 10 books with its 3.628 million possible outcomes. And we want to take that 99% that we talked about earlier and say, if I could reduce 10 books, the number of possible outcomes by 99.9%, how can I do that? Well, there's lots of different ways, but let's take a look and see what we can do. So an example approach, pick 10 books and put the following guidelines in place. You can pick any 6 hardcover books you want, and you can pick any 4 paperback books you want. That's fine. You have that freedom. All I'm asking is that you take the 6 and the 4 and you split them into 2 groups of 5. And can you make sure that each one of those groups has at least 1 paperback and 1 hardback? Very simple sort of rule structure. Number of possible outcomes. Well, instead of 3,628,800, I think it is, you come out with 256. That is a reduction of 99.993%. So when you start thinking about just a few guidelines, help with the outcome. And this is where we start talking about, and we'll talk a bit more about security as we kind of go through here. This is where security being implemented at the right stages, especially in the preventive stage and early on, through good quality practices and making sure that it's part of that, you're able to reduce the number of possible outcomes. And again, when we think about possible outcomes, we think about entropy, we think about unpredictability. I don't know what's going to happen. And that's a concern. So let's talk about that good quality and security relationship a bit. So when we think about costs and the preventive costs, on the impact on quality, it's that minimize your code inconsistency and inefficiency when we think about software world. When we think about security is you're minimizing your threats and attack vectors. So that's what we're really looking at. So a security prevention is to say, what are the threats? What can derail that? What can take that down? I used to work at a company and, we had the idea of what we wanted to do is we had our business continuity and disaster recovery, and everybody talked about how they wanted to make the product work. So we named our BCDR plan. The company was called Babylon, and what we did was we named the BCDR program that we were working on. We call it Project 539 because 539 BC was when Babylon was overrun by Cyrus of Persia. And it was like, that's when it happened. And so this is Project 539. How do we take it down? And what we did was we really worked on asking those questions and addressing those. And again, it kind of goes back to inverting what we talked about. Appraisal and the quality and the impact on quality. This is identify, mitigate sinks, taints, things along those lines that we would often see in the software quality world. Where in the impact on security is it identifies and mitigate weaknesses. Now, weaknesses aren't the same as vulnerabilities. Weaknesses are, I'm tapping on that door perhaps, and I think I could possibly go in there. That's a potential thing that we need to look at. And that's a separate set of eyes looking at it, because oftentimes when you're doing it in the prevention, you've got somebody sitting there who's inside the product, whereas in that appraisal, somebody who's outside. Most of the time, appraisals are independent appraisals and independent individuals going, you know what? I think that's not as strong. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. You keep using that term. You keep using that product. I don't think it's as strong as you think it is. And then you get into the internal failure. And so this is where you start looking at things like providing funding for, again, these are the cost for making up for poor quality, provide funding for resources for rework and tech debt management. So I have limited number of software developers and engineers. I have a product that needs to constantly move forward. I need new features. I've got to keep up with the market space, but I've got this growing amount of technical debt. So I'm constantly having to do service packs. Constantly having to go back and refix things, which I'm missing deadlines. It's making it very hard to compete. Whereas you get that internal failure where we're providing funding for resources for vulnerability remediation. And this is where you start seeing me talk about tooling and security tooling. And traditional security tooling, most security tools literally sit in here, your vulnerability management tools, things that we're all common of and things along those lines. They're like, right, it lights up like a Christmas tree all over the dashboard. Like, what are we going to do? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then you get to external failure. And this is where you just say, you know what, we're going to set aside funds and resources for credits, recalls, and legal support. So we have insurance to handle that. And the same thing on the other side is you're providing insurance and your cyber insurance resources to support data breaches. And also you're working out to get independent incident forensics. So again, a lot of external security support needed there. Those are expensive. A lot of those are retainer. So you may never need them, but you're paying for them just in case you ever do. So again, you're getting a lot of investment up front, but you're not actually getting a use case and actually being able to use that. And if you do have to use that money, it's basically because, it's hit the fan and thing has just gone wrong. So even more inspiration. So the greatest waste in America is failure to use the ability of people. Money and time spent for training will be ineffective unless inhibitors to good work are removed. I love me some Deming, by the way. All right. So security's traditional place at the table. So when we start thinking about security tooling, it tends to sit over here. So I want to bring that up. Most of the time, security tooling, security teams, engineering, operations, vulnerability management tools, they tend to sit over in this area that I've got highlighted. They sit in that internal failure. Hey, it's already out. It's going to go wrong. You've seen this all the time. You get a vulnerability if you're on the developer side or you're a security engineer, you see your dashboard. You're like, here's the list of vulnerabilities that have come through, minus the scan or whatever I need to do. And here's the 468 vulnerabilities that we've identified. Would you please take care of them? And then you hand them to the engineering team and they're looking around kind of going, we're never going to get this done. How are we going to do this? Well, we have SLAs and you run into this combative environment. But what's happened is you have all these. And guess what? Some of them may get remediated. But what's going to end up happening is next month you're like, hey, it's actually, we've got more now. How did we go up more? We actually fixed some of these. Yes, but there's a whole bunch more because what we didn't do is we actually didn't fix the problem. We just fixed the symptom. We just basically gave cough medicine because somebody had a cough. We didn't figure out why they were coughing. And that's really where a lot of those tools sit. And if you'll notice from a cost standpoint, a lot of them sit there and they're costed accordingly. They tend to be pretty much more expensive. When you start looking at security tooling, and I say this as a security expert, oftentimes I spend time looking at security tools and I go, there's a cost element and that's what you're paying for. You're paying for them to capture work that you yourself could capture with a little bit better investment in training and a little bit better investment in just putting some basic guardrails in place. So one of the things that we'll talk about here is good quality and security best practices for code as we kind of dig into it. Quality methodologies can help you. They talk about shifting security left and where possible start left. And for those of you who are old school individuals from the DevOps and DevSecOps world like me, the actual term shift left was actually start left. Go back to the beginning and start there and work from the front. Know what your outcome is going to be, and then establish those parameters that you need to do beforehand. Oftentimes, what happens is if you don't do it from a security standpoint, then you get all of that potential unpredictability. All those vulnerabilities are really potential outcomes and unknown outcomes. And then you have to invest in tooling to capture all of it, this big net to capture everything. And then they just kind of have to throw it back over. And none of it ever actually gets done. But if you start over there on that left side, start from a security standpoint, just start left, not just think when you think shift left, also think start left, getting over there and asking those questions. And from a security standpoint, asking what's the outcome and how do we secure the outcome? How does it, because it can't be a good outcome if it's not effective, if it's not efficient, and if it's not fit for the current and future purposes. So we have to have all of those things factored in, both from a quality standpoint as well as a security standpoint. And they have to work together. So implement security by design within your design stage, and then focus on securing the desired outcome, not just security controls. And this is one of the biggest things that I have seen, having worked in both elements, is the idea that we can just fix problems with security by putting controls, bolting controls on at the cost of the outcome. And what that does is it creates a lot of conflict. It creates a lot of unnecessary work because nobody ever actually communicates. At this point, you hand it off to somebody at 90% of the way done and say, oh, by the way, you now have to do the security review. And the security review has said, oh, you have to do these other things. So by the way, I know you're running and you've been doing this marathon, but for the last 2 miles, we're going to throw on a weighted vest and have you carry these kettlebells. Go for it, please. Thank you so much. It's just not going to happen. And it's going to create a lot of stress. It's going to create a lot of breaking, and that's not a good thing. And then obviously focusing on security as lighting the path forward, not blocking it. So the way I often think about it is for those of you who, again, think old school, Jeffrey Moore's S curve. And so the idea of when we talk about the S curve, talks about those crossing the chasm. And he mentions about how, you have your innovators, you have your early adopters, you have this big chasm before you get to your early majority, late majority, and laggards. And so the idea of rather than having to make that chasm leap blindly and hope for the best, or in reference to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, rather than have to take that leap of faith, build the bridge for which them to be able to walk across and, then pick the right holy grail to work from. Anyway, with that. And so go on. And then as we kind of go through here, that kind of wraps me here where we got our upcoming webinar coming up. And I'm going to hand this back over to Robert, and we'll talk more about that.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Wow, that was really great. My favorite part was about the ounce of prevention cost model. And then from a DevSecOps perspective, I perceive it as being about finding security issues at later stages in the CI/CD pipeline results in an order of magnitude increase in cost per later stage. So that's really, really fascinating. Before we move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar, I want to let you know about a few things that are coming up. And Jonathan said, oh, yeah, look, we've got a webinar coming up. So on August 28th, you're welcome to join Peter McKee, our head of developer relations, who will be presenting on code quality at warp speed, powering up continuous delivery with static code analysis. Let's see, we just dropped a link in the chat that you can use to register for the webinar. So check it out. As a reminder, a short survey will appear at the end of the Q&A session, and we greatly appreciate your feedback. Okay, one more thing. Right now on your screen, you should see a brief poll asking if you'd like to learn more about our solutions. So please take an instant to respond. We'd love to get back to you. Okay. Let's see, Q&A. We have some good questions. I think, Jonathan, this one is with your experiences particularly suited for you to answer. How have you seen this approach put in place in real organizations, and what were the results? You've got a lot of background in applying this, start left approach. How has it worked for you?
Yeah. So, interesting enough, prior to working at Sonar, I actually had actually onboarded Sonar as a product in an organization I was working at that focused on healthcare technology. And so one of the opportunities that I had there is I was the senior director for risk and compliance. And so I was really kind of sitting on the security side, but I had just a large view on everything that we needed to do. And being in a healthcare organization, healthcare technology, there was a highly regulated requirement. So I had to understand all the regulations and the requirements there for medical devices, things along those lines, whether it was pharmaceutical, HIPAA, you name it, everything along those lines. And so what often we would find is we had the opportunity to sit down, and I would have like the VP of engineering came over to me one day and said, "Hey, we want to be able to look at how is it that, you know, trouble for the idea of tooling." And so what we were able to do is we were able to sit there and have a conversation and say, "Hey, we want to improve our code quality. We want to understand how to improve our code quality, but we want to understand what we need to be able to do." And so he was having trouble actually getting funding for the product. And we all understand we all live in a budget world where budgets are usually set and everybody's got their own budget and they already have ideas of how they want to spend that money. And so what we had to actually have a conversation was, okay, this is not just a engineering or development thing. This is a finance department and talking to the CFO and helping them understand the way that we're utilizing our resources and making sure that our utilization costs are what they need to be, because that's going to participate and help us manage the funding associated with onboarding more resources. Can we do more with less? How do you do that? Going to my boss, who was the CISO, and having the conversation of, hey, from a security standpoint, we need to be able to, we spend a lot of time and money looking at dashboards, tuning dashboards, building things, and identifying stuff that, quite honestly, it never goes away. We need to do a better job of actually going back and investing in quality and saying, how can we improve the overall quality outcomes? And being able to show that what we would do over time is, look, I will lower the noise. And so it became more of an approach of noise canceling versus noise reduction. So a lot of noise reduction headphones, and this was the example I actually used with them. I said, right now we have a noise reduction process where basically we put a physical barrier and it blocks out all noise sound equally. Even those things that, it blocks out the things that aren't really important, but it also blocks out the things that are important. And we need to do a better job of being able to identify our priorities. And so by taking the quality approach and going back into that original design, what we're able to do is actually have these conversations and say, right, let's look at the noise canceling. So what we're able to do is actually sit in a room of 500 people, hear all the different conversations going on, but I can focus on the important conversations. I can focus on the important sounds, and I can say, those are the things that I need to prioritize right now. And by prioritizing these things, I will solve larger problems. If I can focus on the conversation in front of me, because it's the most important thing. If I can go focus on this particular thing, it's the most important thing. It allows me to put um, that emphasis in place. So when I do have things that escape and go into an internal failure stage, that I identify that they're able to be prioritized and then further reduce the entropy. And it kind of goes to that idea of how quality and security have always been aligned. Think about quality. Quality's been around since the guilds of, medieval Europe. And so then you get into things like the factory model, the Taylor model, a part of the Industrial Revolution. And then you get into what was BSI 5150, I think, which was the 1950s, which is basically your Plan, Do, Check, Act, all of that eventually became ISO 9001 in 1987. Uh, you take that and you start thinking about centuries of quality management and methodology, and then you partner it up against like information security. And so, for those of you who aren't as old as me, the very first information security standard really didn't come formalized until 1995. And that was BSI 7799, which most of you would now know today as ISO 27001. Didn't take on the ISO language until like 2005. But that was 1995. And for those of you who don't remember back to 1995, I mean, the entire like discography of Nirvana was over before 1995. Like the entire popularity of the Counting Crows was over before 1995. I mean, there's all these different things that were going on. But when you start thinking about that, that original information security standard really wasn't cybersecurity. So it was built off of it. The actual standard 7799 779-2, which for those of you who know ISO, for example, ISO 27002 is the Annex A controls, good practice controls. 77992 was the same thing, but it was all based upon quality modeling and continual improvement. So the inception of security was always founded in the idea of quality and the continuous improvement. And so it's really not two separate things. Good quality has security as a component, and it is part of what makes things fit for purpose or deliver that. And so actually being able to take that at a highly regulated space, we were able to do that. But we have also taken it in other places where we were dealing with things globally, like localization and translation and other companies that I've worked at in my past.
Here's a good one about the ounce of prevention cost model. Question is there proof for the factor of 10 statements? I've seen pitches before, but I've found it very hard to find evidence for this.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there are different types of use cases, and most of the time this actually ends up um, at somewhat of an industry level. There is more data around there. You have to dig for it. Usually what I have found is when I've done my own modeling within an organization, um, what I've been able to do, because most of the time I've had both quality and security within my job titles. Anybody who's checked me out on LinkedIn knows that most of the time I've got both of those in there. Whenever I do the modeling, it tends to pan out close to that factor of 10. Sometimes it's a factor of 8. Sometimes the ROI might be 7. Sometimes it might be even be higher, but it tends to come out on average. But it will actually work more in the idea of how much you're currently investing in tools and then asking the question of where you should invest them. Because most of the time, the struggle that people run into in the factor of 10 is being able to showcase it over a long enough time frame to show here's what we're currently spending and where we're spending our money, which might be out of alignment. Here's where we make that investment, and then being able to see the transition. Because if you've got a lot of quality issues, and this is especially for those who have a Six Sigma background, you know that if you're currently sitting at a Sigma 3 and you're trying to get to a Sigma 4, Sigma 5, that you're most people, if for those who don't know, like CMMI for more software, like CMMI, content maturity, if you're at a 3 and you're trying to get to a 4, the level of investment and the feedback and where you're going to want to put your efforts is going to be different. And so being able to model it over a long period of time, most organizations don't really invest the amount of time to be able to say, like, here's where you begin to see it. And it can take, when I was doing my investments, I would sit there and take a look at something, and it might take me 18 months of constantly looking at the value chain. But it also meant a lot of conversations, to be fair, on the upfront with personnel about saying, we need to get out of certain budget mindsets of being able to say, this is my money, this is your money, and these are our resources. But it often becomes that difficult because organizations are so quick to move forward and there's such a dynamic change that those individuals aren't normally in the same position long enough to be able to assess that model and things along those lines. But if you do have the chance, it does pan out. And whoever asked that question, it's a great question. It does vary. I think over the long enough period of time, though, people have taken that theory and they have to apply it at their organization or individual organizational level. Obviously, if there's additional questions about that, and
Yep. We
there's a
can
way for me
follow
to
up with them.
contact, I can follow up with them
Yep.
indirectly. I'd love to.
Here's a really good one I like. Is there a mapping cheat sheet between software code quality and software code security, controls, metrics, requirements that can aid a developer in the prevention and appraisal phases?
Oh yeah, I would say if I was going to use a good one, I think it's ISO. You guys may have seen it on the poll that we were originally. I don't know how many people are familiar with ISO 25010. That's a software quality ISO, and it incorporates actual security protocols into place inside there. So if you start thinking about anybody who's got a data protection background, you understand that data security, like you have to keep it secure, but you also have to keep it accurate. It's one component of it. One of the things that ISO 25 standard does a really good job of is giving you that framework to work from, and it's got some control sets. If you take that 25 family, the normative references, so I'm talking ISO language and I apologize. But for those of you who are talking about normative references, if you look at the 25,000 normative reference and you look at the 25010 standard, the recent updates have actually been really good. And so you can begin to see sort of that mapping and how you would want to build in that control. I think that's probably the best way to start. Again, if you see that and you have other questions about it, more than happy to speak to you one-on-one about it. But that's probably where I would start if you're wanting to say, how do I do a mapping between something like a 9001 and a 27001? Find yourself, especially in software world, just go to 25010 and just look at the normative family for the 25,000 series.
Let's see. Here's a good one. Outdated libraries are often associated with security risks, but if I only use safe methods, I don't need to update the library. What are your thoughts?
So do you have to update? The answer is, do you have to make those updates? And I'm going to break this down. So my thoughts are everything is based upon the concept of risk. And are you comfortable with the outcomes? And each organization is going to have a different approach. And this is where I think we struggle. And I go back to the Han Solo, Indiana Jones variation. There are going to be some people on here who are very Indiana Jones and are like, absolutely, absolutely, you must do this. And then you're going to have people who are like, don't ever tell me the odds. And so when you start doing that real risk, asking yourself, what is the overall risk score? What am I comfortable with? And so if you think about, let's say the likelihood is something's going to happen once a year, that's the annual risk occurrence, and you start having the conversation of it's going to cost me about X months. This is my single loss occurrence or SLE. I'm going to multiply those two together and I get what's called an ALE, an AL because like I'm going to drink, but it's the ALE. And so what it is that's the annual loss expectancy. And so I would tell people to do that kind of exercise and actually spend some time talking with your risk people because quality and security are both very much risk-driven standards. And I think to the person who was asking about the 25 that I answered about the 2510 on code quality, another standard to look at is just look at your standard risk management frameworks. I personally think one of the best risk management frameworks out there is RMF, that is NIST 837, I think R2, just because of the tiering model. But what it will let you do is basically sit there and say, hey, here's an IT asset risk, and that's actually one of their classes and the types, and being able to sit there and kind of do an exercise and ask yourself, what is the comfort level that we have for those types of losses, and understanding what those old code bases are used for. Like if they're not used for anything that is going to have certain levels of access to criticality, that's fine. If you think about the old school OSI 7-layer model, depending upon where those particular vulnerabilities are sitting, if they're sitting at one layer, they can potentially impact all the layers above them. And so a lot of vulnerabilities tend to go up one, down one, things along those lines, but you just have to be conscious of where it sits and what's also sitting there. If you've got something that's potentially going to cause a problem at the data layer versus something that's going to cause an issue at the application or the presentation layer, things along those lines. Yeah.
Well, there were a lot of other questions that we thought we could get to in the live Q&A, but we didn't. So I'll remind
I'm
you that,
talkative.
yeah, no, it's good. We will answer those. We'll post those in communities. Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks for all the excellent questions. Again, go to the community. It's a great place to pose additional questions and review questions previously asked along with our responses. We scrub those, the community all the time, and people are on top of questions. So it's a great resource for you. Please visit sonarsource.com for further information on how clean as you code benefits you as a developer and to find information on our future webinars and events. Thank you again in advance for providing your feedback via the survey that's about to pop up on your screen, and see y'all next time.